Hi, I'm Moss here with my sound impressions of JHAudio's new Roxanne version 2. Now, it's been 3 years since I reviewed the original Roxannes, which I still have here, and there have been some changes made. Now, the Roxannes were, of course, a really revolutionary pair of IEMs. They were the first to have this bass adjustment module in here, which allowed, through this neat 4-pole connector, you can see on the IEMs all sitting here that they've got the 4-pole connector. They allow the the adjustment to adjust the levels of the bass, and so this is for each channel because there are no 4-pole attenuators available. So this is the way it is. But it managed to fit all into one IEM cable, and it made, of course, the cable somewhat bulky. So one of the changes, well, two of the changes are to make the overall pair of IEMs less bulky. It's a little bit hard to see clearly through here, but one of the changes is that with the new version, it allows deeper insertions. So if I take off this tip and now holding them up side by side, trying to get them lined up to the camera, you can see that the original, which is here, will not insert as deeply as the new version, which sticks out further. So the design has been streamlined, and it should give a better fit for a lot of people. Now, one of the other improvements is, of course, having a four wires per channel made for quite a bulky cable. So one of the improvements is it now comes with a cable, a Black Dragon cable from Moon Audio, and this is an overmolded cable, so it's quite a robust design. It's got a big chunky plug here, so it sacrifices maybe ultimate ergonomics still, but going to the earpiece, you've still got a fairly thin cable, kind of as thin as you'd expect to get, back when you had the cheap cables on all IEMs. So it's still a much nicer cable. You can also get, of course, from Moon Audio, Silver Dragon, which I have on here. I'll talk about in a bit. It's a bit bulkier, but a bit better sounding. But anyhow, the main thing is that these are 12 drivers per side IEMs, and it's not a pissing contest factor in that design. There is a reason for it. Now, basic reason is headroom. Now, if you listen to, say, a single balanced armature pair of IEMs, and you can listen at a moderate level, it will sound okay, but if you turn the volume up, you'll immediately hear distortion. And just like a full-size pair of speakers, will have multiple drivers so you can listen loud, same with these. And because who are the customers for these IEMs? Answer: rock musicians, and rock musicians listen loud. And bad for your hearing as it is, these are really designed for people who want to turn the volume up. And it's very apparent in the design, they're a robust design. They're designed essentially for rock musicians. Now, in that, they eschew some of the kind of audiophile aspects that some of the other IEMs I've listened with recently. For example, like the RE2000s, which I reviewed recently, they have very strong bass. They're excellent dynamic drivers. Kind of delicate treble that brings out the fine nuanced details of whatever instrument you're listening to. But that kind of sound, don't even worry about it with these. Now, we often talk about soundstage with IEMs or with headphones in general. Now, you don't have the outside pinna of your ear to give you a sense of soundstage with IEMs. I mean, it's kind of impossible. And you can sort of cheat, and what manufacturers do is say they'll adjust the frequency response to give a sort of sense of soundstage. I mean, if you move the mids back, then you will have a feeling that the singer or the instruments are further back away from the audience. There are tricky DSP effects like from Darren Fong Audio, where you can adjust the timing of different frequencies and give it a sense of there being a soundstage. I mean, it's mainly used with full-sized headphones to give a 3D effect, but none of that in these. They're not even going to try and give you a soundstage. Now, there is a lot of detail that comes through with these. I mean, I've used the original Roxannes with a variety of players, and it was clear going from, say, an original X5 up to, I think it was a Cal XM, and then up to an AK240 back at the time. It was clear that there was an increase in detail going through the DAPs with these, but they're not a delicate sounding IEM. They're very thick sounding. They have the mid-range is quite forward. The treble is kind of a bit darkish, especially with this Black Dragon cable on. And yeah, I don't like talking about cables too much, but this is a copper cable. This is a silver-plated copper cable, and like the Dita cables I reviewed, that silver plating on the cable seems to make something of a difference. And it's the same with these. Now, being quite mid-forward, and you can adjust the bass up, and they sound, it's still, like I said in my original review, they still sound much like a pair of old Odyssey headphones, which they had that flat bass, and then the drop-off fairly late, and then the treble was somewhat muted. And it works really well when you turn the volume up and you really want to rock out. And if I listen to them after listening to other IEMs, they kind of sound thick and I don't want to listen. But if I listen to them exclusively and I really want to, kind of turn the volume up a bit, then the Roxannes become really, really enjoyable. Now, compared to other IEMs, of course, you have the good old Laylas. Now, the Laylas are, they have a crossover built in as well. They have a more competent sounding presentation. So the bass is much better. The mids aren't so forward. There's more of a spread, or they're still fairly dark sounding IEMs. Actually, they're fairly similar to the Andromedas when you put foam tips on them. So they're still a fairly dark sounding IEM. But the thing is, listening with these, and maybe the Andromedas and other IEMs, is I miss that forward mid-range that you get with the Roxannes. The Roxannes push the singer up and the instruments up more in your face, and it makes it feel more intimate. And the reason for this design is, well, who owns a pair? The answer, for example, Slash, a guitarist, and he likes his guitars up front. And even more so, he's influenced the design of the latest JHAudio IEMs, the Lolas, which have a better mid-range using 2 dynamic drivers. But although you don't get quite the same, you still get good quality, you get a lot of detail, you still get a lot of stuff. The soundstage is not kind of fake wide, none of that. It's all kind of in the middle. And there's less of a sense of delineation because it's pushing everything up front. The mid-range is up front, everything else is up front. It kind of reminds me of this pair of Sony studio monitors I tried when I was visiting Sony, and they were totally non-audiophile in sound. Everything was kind of just in the middle, and it was intended like if you have your stage, and instead of trying to seem up front and everything spread out, they were kind of like if you're way back in the audience and you have this narrow spread, and it gives the person doing the mixing in the studio, what have you, a clear impression of that stage from further back. And the Roxannes are a lot like that, but again, they are the kind of IEMs for turning up and rocking out to the sound of the instruments and the vocalist. And if I listen to AC/DC with them, that's excellent. Van Halen, of course. Van Halen, unfortunately, due to their recording studio doesn't have those huge dynamics that you get in a lot of stuff, but it works out really well with things like the Roxannes, even though they're capable of more detail than there's in a Van Halen recording. But in terms of other aspects of the design, you can turn down the bass a lot, and it will not bring out the treble so much. It just turns down the bass. And if you set these at 9 o'clock, and they're set at 4 o'clock at the moment, but if you set them at 9 o'clock, that'll cut down a lot of the bass and make them closer to a kind of neutral sound. But to me, that makes them sound kind of boring. If you turn them to 2 o'clock, apparently this is kind of JH13 level. If you turn them up to 4 o'clock, it's kind of JH16 level bass. In the end, I decided I like to play to their designs, and you can get versions of these cables without the adjuster, just straight maximum bass. And being dark sounding, for example, I have JH13 Freak Phase, one of my IEMs, and I put on this aftermarket cable, and it does kind of make them sound brighter. And yeah, again, cables and stuff like that, but it does match up with these really, really nicely. And the Silver Dragon as well, to a degree, it seems to bring out the treble a little bit better. Again, that silver-plated copper here versus straight copper here. And it's an expensive cable though, and other people make these cables, and they're expensive because of the construction and all the parts you have to get and what have you. So these IEMs in the end are very much for a particular kind of listener who wants a particular kind of result, and that is like Slash, like the guitarist. That kind of presentation, these suit very well. But if you're listening to like a pure kind of audiophile presentation, like my good old friend Gavin, who made the 1+2s, where it's going to sound like a pair of speakers and you have all the delicate treble stuff, that's not what these are. These are really rockin' IEMs. So a lot has changed in the industry since these were made, but they still have their niche, or however you say it. And they still are fantastic IEMs for the right kind of person. Okay, gear impressions. Now, you don't want to use them, obviously, with anything really dark sounding, so maybe they're not going to be such a great match with, say, Fio's X5 Mark III or some of the warmer sounding DAPs. I have here a Hy-B R6. That's kind of a nice match, so it's just the kind of straight down the line kind of. The good thing now is, compared to my comparison way back where I was, using an X5 and then up to an AK240, the kind of quality of sound I got out of an AK40, I can get much cheaper nowadays, under $1,000, and the R6 is going to be one of those. The problem, of course, is something like this has a 10 ohm output impedance. Thankfully, the Roxannes didn't have much of trouble with that. The original Laylas did. These things, these monsters, they just went haywire on something like the original X5. But these seems to be I haven't tried the Laylas on the new Hybe yet, but the Roxannes worked out okay out of here without changing frequency response. And the problem is that nothing has a flat impedance curve. You know, they mention the impedance of IEMs, but they just give one figure, or the average figure. Whereas, you know, multiple balanced armatures can have, you know, a non-flat frequency response. If you have a non-zero ohm output, I mean more than, say, a couple of ohms, you can start to get changes in the frequency response of the IEMs, which can be significant enough to cause some trouble, and it can be a bit of a lottery. So generally, they tend to be, multiple balanced armature IEMs tend to be suited to 0 ohm or close to 0 ohm output impedance gear. But, you know, I had no trouble with the R6, funnily enough, so maybe the way these have been set up seems to be somewhat flexible with that. So that was a good thing to note. But, you know, they do value good quality gear, and thankfully all that's becoming cheaper. So, you know, if you do end up going crazy and buying something like a Quad Hugo 2 to use with them, well, that would work out really well too. Now, in the end, these are, you know, a really fantastic pair of IEMs if you're after a particular style of listening, and they're unapologetically, you know, designed for people who like to rock out. They don't have quite the thundering bass for the good old Laylas, but they do bring music up into your face, and they can be extremely enjoyable when you listen to them, especially with stuff where you want to turn the volume up loud. So thanks to JHAudio and Moon Audio for providing me with a pair of Roxanne V2s for review. Also thanks to my patrons who are listed on screen. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the making of my videos, and you also get access to cool things such as being able to see my videos before they're put up live, as well as participating in raffles for some of the gear I've been given. As well, you can see your name on screen too. If supporting me via Patreon is not your thing, you can also check out headphone-earphone.reviews, my website, and in the right-hand sidebar, if you're thinking of buying a pair of headphones, do check out the links there, and if you buy through those links, it sends me a few dollars, and that helps support my videos as well. So thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you online.